Let us move now from the crowded streets of the medieval city into the halls of power. Where once you imagined yourself as an ordinary townsman, we now turn our eyes toward the throne of England and the young king who once sat upon it. His name was Richard II. Richard was not born to rule in ordinary times. He came into the world in 1367 in the city of Bordeaux while it was still under English control. He was the grandson of the great King Edward III, whose reign had carried England into the long and difficult conflict we now call the 100 Years' War. From the very beginning, Richard's life was touched by grandeur and by fragility. His father was the celebrated Edward, known as the Black Prince, a warrior of unmatched reputation. But the Black Prince was gravely ill by the time Richard was still a child, and he died when the boy was only 10. Soon after, the old King Edward III also passed away. And so, in the year 1377, Richard, not yet an adolescent, ascended to the throne of England. Imagine the weight of a crown upon the head of a child. The halls around him filled with advisors, uncles, courtiers, each with their own ambitions and their own counsel. The kingdom itself was restless. Wars abroad strained its coffers, while discontent simmered at home. In these early years, Richard leaned heavily on the guidance of his counselors, but even as a boy, he displayed a strong sense of dignity and majesty. Chroniclers often remarked on his appearance, tall with fine features and a keen awareness of his own station. One of the defining moments of his young reign came only 4 years later, in 1381, during what has come to be known as the Peasants' Revolt. Discontent with high taxes and years of hardship had driven thousands of ordinary people into rebellion. They gathered in London, storming buildings, threatening the court, and demanding change. It was here that Richard, still only 14 years old, revealed a rare kind of composure. Standing before the furious crowd, he spoke to them directly. He spoke with calm assurance, promising reforms, pledging to hear their grievances. For a moment, it seemed that his words carried enough weight to soothe the unrest. Many believed that this was the moment when Richard truly became a king. But as years passed, the promise of that youthful courage gave way to a different reality. Richard's reign grew more troubled. He began to rule with a sense of absolute authority, insisting on the majesty of his crown and bristling at any opposition. His court became known for its refinement, its art, its pageantry, its attention to ritual, but also for its extravagance. Taxes were raised, favorites were promoted, and resentment deepened among the nobles. By the 1390s, Richard's rule was increasingly unstable. His cousin, Henry of Bolingbroke, the son of John of Gaunt, grew in influence. Henry was ambitious, careful, and determined. Tensions between the two men grew until Richard made a fateful decision. He exiled Henry, stripped him of his inheritance, and sought to strengthen his own grasp on the throne. But fortune can change quickly. When John of Gaunt died, Richard seized his estates for the crown. Henry returned in defiance, landing with an army. Support for Richard crumbled swiftly. Nobles who once bowed to him now sided with his rival. Richard, unprepared for such betrayal, found himself abandoned. In the year 1399, Richard II was deposed. He was taken into custody, forced to abdicate, and confined within Pontefract Castle. What precisely happened to him there remains a matter of quiet speculation. Most accounts agree that he died in captivity the following year, in 1400. Some suggest he starved, deliberately or by neglect. Others claim he was quietly killed. Whatever the truth, his reign ended not with triumph, but with silence, far from the majesty he once insisted upon. Imagine then the contrast. A boy who once calmed a furious mob with his words, ending his days alone in a cold stone keep. A king who demanded reverence for his crown, undone by the ambitions of his own cousin. Richard's story is not one of great victories on the battlefield, nor of lasting reforms. It is the story of a fragile throne, of a monarchy struggling to define itself in a turbulent age, and of a man whose youth promised brilliance, but whose later years revealed the limits of power when it is wielded without restraint. And so Richard II passed into history. A king remembered more for the drama of his downfall than for the strength of his rule. His life reminds us of the instability of medieval power and the fleeting nature of majesty in a time when loyalty could shift with the wind. As we leave his story behind, let the memory of Richard's crown rest quietly in the background, like a faded echo of ceremony. And let us move forward toward another mystery of the medieval age.
We leave behind the troubled reign of Richard II and turn now to a different kind of story. Not of one king, but of an entire brotherhood. A brotherhood that once stood at the very center of medieval power, and then, almost suddenly, seemed to vanish. The Knights Templar. The order began in the early 12th century. A group of knights, deeply devoted, swore themselves to protect pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. At first, they were few in number, humble, even poor. Their first quarters were in part of the old Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, from which they drew their name. But over time, the Templars grew. They fought in the Crusades, they trained relentlessly, and they became known for their discipline and bravery. And yet, it was not only on the battlefield that they found power. The order became wealthy. Pilgrims entrusted them with money for safekeeping, and in time, the Templars developed one of the first systems of banking in Europe. Imagine the great castles they built. Strongholds with thick walls, heavy gates, and towers that rose high above the landscape. These were not only military bases, but also centers of administration, where records were kept and wealth was guarded. By the 13th century, the Templars were powerful indeed. Too powerful, some thought. Their lands stretched across Europe and the Middle East. Kings borrowed from them. Merchants entrusted them with treasures. The order was exempt from many local laws, answering directly to the Pope himself. And then, as quickly as their rise, came their fall. In the year 1307, King Philip IV of France turned against them. He was deeply in debt to the Templars, and perhaps feared their influence. On a single day in October, his agents struck. Across France, Templars were arrested. Their leaders were accused of heresy, of secret rituals, of crimes whispered but never clearly proven. The charges were dark, but evidence was uncertain. Many today believe the accusations were a pretext, a way for Philip to erase his debts and seize their wealth. Over the next years, the order was dismantled. Trials were held. Some Templars confessed under pressure. Others resisted. By 1312, the Pope had officially disbanded the order. Its leaders, including the Grand Master Jacques de Molay, were executed. And here begins the mystery. What became of the Templars' immense treasure? Contemporaries believed they held vast stores of gold, relics, and documents. But when their castles were seized, little was found. Some said the wealth had been moved in secret. Others claimed that the Templars' treasure was less material and more spiritual, knowledge, relics, or even secrets too dangerous to reveal. Legends grew. Stories told of wagons rolling out of Paris by night, loaded with chests, bound for hidden locations. Some imagined treasure buried deep beneath the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Others suggested it was spirited away to Scotland, to be guarded in secrecy. Still others linked the Templars to myths of the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant. Of course, historians remain cautious. It is possible that much of the supposed treasure was exaggerated or spent long before the order fell. Yet the absence of clear records, combined with the dramatic end of the Templars, left a space for imagination. And into that space, centuries of mystery have flowed. Today, ruins of their fortresses still stand across Europe and the Middle East. Silent stones, weathered by centuries, holding whatever truths they once knew. Step into one and you may find a vaulted chamber, cool and dim. Carvings of crosses still etched into walls. Empty recesses where chests might once have been stored. A reminder that what was once so powerful can, in time, become a hushed echo. For those who like to dream, the treasure of the Templars may still be out there, resting quietly, hidden away. For others, the true treasure lies in their story, the rise of a brotherhood, the sudden fall, and the enduring mystery that refuses to fade. And as we leave behind the Templars, their cloaks of white and red, fading like a banner in the wind, we turn now to a different side of the medieval world. A world not of soldiers or kings, but of noblewomen, whose lives reveal another layer of the medieval city.
We have walked the narrow streets of the medieval city. We have listened to the story of a king undone by his own power. And we have wandered through the mystery of the Knights Templar. Now, let us step into a quieter, more refined world. A place of tapestries, carved wooden furniture, and long corridors of stone. The world of the medieval noble lady. Imagine yourself waking in a chamber within a great manor, or perhaps a castle. The walls are thick, designed to protect against storm and siege alike. The windows are small, their glass a luxury not always present. Instead, oiled cloth may cover the opening, letting in a softened, filtered light. Your bed is far grander than the straw mattress of the townsfolk. A heavy wooden frame with ropes stretched tight to hold a thick mattress stuffed with wool or feathers. Curtains hang from the canopy, both to give privacy and to keep out drafts. When you rise, the air is cool, even in summer, for castles are seldom warm. Servants attend you, helping to dress you in layers of linen, wool, and sometimes silk. Colors are carefully chosen, for dyes are costly, and rich hues display status. Jewelry might be fastened, a brooch, a chain, a ring set with a stone. The weight of these items is light compared to the weight of expectation. A noble lady is always observed, always measured by the grace with which she carries herself. Breakfast is modest. Bread, cheese, perhaps a cup of warm ale or watered wine. Meals are not hurried. Conversation might flow in gentle tones, while outside the day begins with the bustle of servants, horses, and messengers. The hours that follow are filled with duties. A noble lady does not toil in fields or shops, but her responsibilities are no less real. She oversees the running of the household, ordering supplies, directing servants, ensuring that food, clothing, and provisions are properly managed. She must know how to keep accounts, to manage estates in her husband's absence, and to maintain the reputation of the family. Leisure is also part of her day, though it is often purposeful. Embroidery is more than pastime. It is craft and expression. Delicate stitches bring forth patterns of flowers, animals, or sacred scenes. Reading may be possible, if she has been taught, though books are rare and precious, often in Latin or French. Music fills the chambers too. A lute, a harp, or the steady sound of voices in song. Beyond these walls lies the greater duty of marriage. For noblewomen, unions are rarely matters of personal choice. They are alliances, carefully arranged to bind families together, to secure land, wealth, or political influence. A young noblewoman may find herself wed to a man decades older, or sent to a distant estate far from the place she once called home. Motherhood is central. The bearing of children is expected and often frequent. Yet it is fraught with risk. The comforts of nobility cannot always shield against the dangers of childbirth or the illnesses that sweep through halls as they do through towns. A noble lady's life, though privileged, is never free from shadow. Evenings bring gatherings, a great hall filled with flickering torchlight, long tables spread with meats, stews, breads, and sweetmeats. Jesters or musicians provide gentle entertainment. The noble lady sits among her peers, her place determined by rank, her manners observed by all. Here she must balance grace with caution, speaking enough to be engaging, but never too freely to invite scandal. And when the hall grows quiet again, and the castle settles into the stillness of night, she returns to her chamber. The heavy door closes, the curtains are drawn around the bed, and within those stone walls, in the silence broken only by the wind, she rests. A day in the life of a medieval noble lady is one of contrasts, surrounded by luxuries unimaginable to most, yet constrained by duty and expectation. A life lived within walls both protective and confining. A rhythm steady, deliberate, and deeply bound to family, to faith, and to the fragile balance of power. And as we reflect on her world, we see another face of the medieval age. Not only hardship in the streets, not only mystery in the cloisters, not only kings upon their thrones, but the quieter endurance of women whose lives shaped households, families, and, in their own way, the course of history itself.
Perfect. Let's bring the journey to a close with a gentle, reflective conclusion that eases the listener into rest. And so, our walk through the medieval city draws to an end. We began among the crowded streets, where life was harsh and unrelenting. We followed a young king, Richard II, from his hopeful beginnings to his quiet downfall. We considered the mystery of the Knights Templar, whose treasure may never be fully known. And we stepped into the world of noblewomen, where duty, grace, and quiet strength defined each passing day. The medieval world was many things at once. It was noisy and crowded, yet also solemn and reverent. It was filled with hardship, but also with rituals, beauty, and a sense of shared faith.
For those who lived within its walls, the rhythm of daily life was steady, familiar, a cycle of work, prayer, and rest. As you listen now, perhaps in the quiet of your own room, you may notice the contrast. Where their nights were often cold, yours is warm. Where their food was scarce and plain, yours is plentiful and varied. Where their lives were bound to survival, you are free to drift, to imagine, to rest without fear. History, in this way, offers perspective. It reminds us of how far the world has changed and how deeply human lives have always been shaped by place, by time, and by circumstance. So, as you settle deeper into your pillow, allow these images of the past to fade softly into the background. The echo of footsteps on cobblestones, the toll of a distant church bell, the rustle of silk within a noble chamber. Let them become gentle, distant, like a lullaby of time itself. The medieval city never truly slept, but you may now let yourself drift. Rest, knowing that the past is far away and the present is here, calm and safe. Good night.